Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. Do I really have to say all quiet, please? In fact, when I'm talking, I feel like I don't even need to talk very loud. So I'll just talk in a normal, regular voice. So ninth graders, world history. Hope you guys are doing well. Miss seeing you guys. Yeah. Just a reminder, I'm sending out all the various different texts. Just make sure that if you haven't sent in your notes already, get those to me from the last unit, and make sure you do a real good job on the essay that is due this Friday. So today's lesson is going to be starting the new unit, and I provided that for you. So make sure you have that in front of you, print it out, or somehow on your screen. This is this very important unit called Nation Building Challenges in the Americas. It's an IB history unit. From paper 3, and I want you to take very, very good notes on this as we go through. This is going to be really interesting. This looks at the situation of all these new American independent countries, United States, Mexico, Brazil, and so forth, and how they're faring in their early years. Lots of difficulties coming up, and how they're going to get that sorted out. And the prospect of actually having to fight more wars. The United States, for example, having to fight against Britain again in the War of 1812. That's going to be part of this unit. And we'll talk about all kinds of crazy fights that go on in Latin America and between the different countries that are newly independent in the Americas. For example, in your handout, you can see on page 3, the Mexican-American War between Mexico and the United States. 1846 to 1848. That's going to be a bit of a doozy. So we got a lot of really interesting stuff that's going to be coming up for you as part of this unit. Basically, I'll be providing this for you, giving you notes, and there's some reading from the chapters. There's a couple of chapters that are relevant, although I think given the challenges of doing quizzes and tests and yada, 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 I think I'm going to just encourage you to read that as a supplement, but rely primarily on what I'm giving you here in the videos to study. Okay, so there's no quizzes on chapters 9 and 17. Okay, if you look there on page 1, we're going to see that we do have a video, the last of the Liberty series, episode number 6 from the American Revolution. Are we to become a nation? In fact, after we finish the notes on this, you'll have a link and you can go directly to that and watch that as well. That's going to be very, very important that you do that. I'm hesitant to include it in here because when I did include one video for another class, YouTube was like, oh my gosh, you have violated copyright. I'm like, but it was already on YouTube. How can that be a violation of copyright? Nevertheless, I'm going to play it safe. I will give you the notes on this, including notes that tie into this last episode of Liberty, the American Revolution, and then watch that. Okay, so that's what's going to be covering there. If you look, I've got some information here for you on the bottom of page 1. It's got this the size of the various different states. That's actually very relevant as far as like the indication of just how big those states are, and also the states that have slaves. Yeah, that's that information right there. You should have that in front of you. Okay, and then of course when we're talking about the various different things going on with the states, you should be taking a look at that, although I'll have a visual up there for you so you can get a sense of where everything is playing out. Okay, so we got that. All right, you guys ready to dive into it? Okay, let's see. What do we know about? We're going to talk about the United States of America. Yay, boy howdy. The United States of America is an independent country, and was so beginning in, let's see, what was the year that Britain said, hey, the war's over, we quit, go ahead, you can be an independent country. That was 1783. In fact, let's go ahead and get to this image. Here we go. I'll just be up here in the corner and you can take a look at this as we go along. Okay, and of course, always, if you get questions, yes, you can rewind, you can play this video back again to hear what I said, but if you still can't hear it, because I didn't say it, first time, second time, third time, do send me a note, send me an email, because I want to know if there's any gaps that you have, okay? So here we go. We've got the United States of America, and waha, we beat the British. 1781, Battle of Yorktown. By 1783, the British have signed the Treaty of Paris, and we're an independent country. Yeah, awesome. This is just great. Everything's just going to be great and fine and super. And not only did we have the original 13 colonies, states, but the British handed over a bunch of territory. I mean, look at all this stuff, all this land, west of the Appalachian Mountains, all the way to the Mississippi River. Boom. Thanks, Britain. Although they did hold on to Canada. The United States had tried to take Canada during the American Revolution, saying, hey, Canada, you should be part of the American Revolution. And Canadians were like, yeah, no, I think we're going to be loyal to Britain. Anyway, more on that relationship with Canada as we go through this unit. So here we go. We've got all this various different new territory that wasn't part of the states. And of course, you can see, and we'll talk about this later, the 13 states are like, oh, that's mine. No, that's mine. That's mine. That's mine. Yeah, there's going to be some problems there. But one thing that's very, very interesting about the end of the American Revolution and the newly independent United States of America was that it wasn't a big, huge, powerful national government. We were united, you guys recall, for the purpose of beating the British. And then we were like 13 states, almost like independent countries, with very loose allegiances toward each other. Yeah, to beat the British, we did that, but what about from here on out? You see any problems coming up? This is actually very fascinating, looking back at this time period, 1783 to 1787 and thereabouts. Because right now in the United States of America, we've got all kinds of issues that we're dealing with. And we look to the government to help us sort through these challenges having to do with coronavirus. The question is, which government? Are we talking about national government? Is that in charge of everything? Well, what about state governments? What about local governments? So for example, is President Trump and the United States Congress, the United States government, in charge of like policies as far as like North Star and how we're doing things? No. I mean, who put the state of Idaho on a soft lockdown as far as schools? That was the state of Idaho. We've got a power sharing situation going on in this country. This is something you're going to be looking to even more next year in government class, but it really, really crops up in our current situation. For example, North Star is entirely responsible for itself being on, I don't know, soft lockdown, whatever we call it. And actually yesterday, the State Board of Education made it clear that it's up to individual schools as to, you know, what they're going to be doing with their situations. It's a mixed thing. And it has been that way. If you go back to this, make sure you write this down. The 13 states did not want to have a big, strong national government telling them what to do. That was clear. They'd had that under the British. The British were bossing them around, telling them what to do in Massachusetts and New York and Virginia and so forth. And the American colonies, states said, get out, Britain, we don't want you to do that. And so they teamed up together. They had to, 13 of them, to beat the British. Thanks, France, for help too. But they really didn't want to have some big, strong national government in charge telling them what to do. They fought for independence for their state so they could determine what was going on in their state, kind of like they'd had it before the British started imposing taxes and sending troops and yada, yada, yada. So that's the situation we have. And people are wondering, like, well, was there actually a document that talked about the relationship between the states? Was there a national government document? Yes, write this down. The Articles of Confederation. This was our national document that existed in those very, very early years of our country being independent. Created whatever, 17 actually in 1777, and then went on until it was replaced by the Constitution in 1787. Okay, so we're going to talk about this Articles of Confederation. This, I think I had that slide that says in 10th grade, it says it was the Constitution before the Constitution was cool. So it's the relationship. This was the one that I told you where the first president of the Congress under the Articles of Confederation was me. Actually, a guy named John Hanson, but it wasn't a very powerful position. Let's get into the details of exactly what the Articles of Confederation provided as far as the relationship with the national government, okay, and the states. All right, key thing, make sure you have this down. The Articles of Confederation provided for a weak national government, a strong 13 states governments, okay? The real power resided with the states. So, for example, if the Congress under the Articles of Confederation wanted to pass a law, 9 of 13 of the delegations from those 13 states had to agree. And they each had basically one vote. It was kind of like, remember with the Second Continental Congress that you had when you were voting for independence? Each state, whether large or small, had one vote. And if you wanted to have some kind of law passed for the nation, it needed 9 of those states to agree to it. Now, having said that, what kind of powers did the national government have? Not much, okay? There was just one congressional body, and they could pass laws, but what kind of laws could they pass? Could they pass laws that taxed the states or the people in the states on behalf of the national government? No. Write that down. No authority for a national tax. Let's see, what else could they not do? There was no ability to have a national army or a national navy, right? I mean, the Continental Army that beat the British disbanded after the war. Security challenges and so forth were left up entirely to the individual states and their state militias. So if something happened, we got invaded and so forth, it would be up to the state militias to handle it. If there are problems existed between the states as far as trade and taxes, tariffs, things like that, the national government could do anything, okay? No authority to do anything about that. Territorial disputes, yeah, we're gonna get to that. Oh my gosh, was there a national government to determine who was gonna get what and so forth of all this new land that the British had handed over? Nope, there was no authority by the national government. In fact, there was no national executive branch. I mean, we think in the United States today, we got a president, we got military, we got all kinds of people working for the national government. That didn't exist under the Articles of Confederation. The president of the United States was basically the guy who presided over the Congress and didn't have much authority. That's why people don't know who the first president of the United States was, because it wasn't really a very powerful position. When we get a president under the Constitution, that's going to be very powerful. And we'll remember George Washington for sure, okay? So we got all these various different weaknesses. Oh, there was no national judiciary, no national court system. So what was there? There was a national legislature that had very, very weak powers, and that's what the people wanted. Would it work? Interesting question. Would it work? It's an interesting question to even ask today as we're going through all the different coronavirus challenges there. That's a part of the national debate. Should the national government come in and like declare a policy to go for every 50 state and every county in each of the 50 states and so forth? Interesting question. Well, I can tell you, when the challenges popped up in between 1783 and 1787, there was a change. Write this down. We are going to ditch the Articles of Confederation, and we are going to create a stronger national government under a new document. It's called the Constitution of the United States. And that's going to be put into effect in 1787, and it is going to provide for a stronger national government, but is it going to provide for an absolutely strong national government? No, it's going to be shared powers. It is going to be referred to as a federal system. Federal meaning, yes, there's a national government, but there's power sharing with the states. Okay. Curiously, we call our national government the federal government, which makes it kind of confusing. All right, let's go back and look at the things that are going to lead to these challenges, to the creation of the Constitution. Okay. One of the key events was an event called Daniel Shays Rebellion, 1786. Okay. And I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard for you guys to figure out that of which of the 13 states did a rebellion take place where people who were really, really, really angry with what was taking place break out and try and take control of themselves and start beating people up. Massachusetts, yeah, kind of where the American Revolution got started. Let's back up a little bit here and take a look at this. Daniel Shays Rebellion, beginning in Massachusetts, but some of the problems existed in other places. You had a bunch of people who were soldiers who had, gone back to working on their farms and so forth. Some of them hadn't actually been paid the full amount that they were promised. Big, big problem. Who's supposed to pay them? The national government. And the national government got its money from where? Donations from the states. Under the Articles of Confederation, could the national government force the states to hand over money so that the national government could pay its debts to soldiers and so forth? No. So you get soldier farmers who are having difficulty with their debts themselves. They've got, because they buy, feed, seed and so forth, and they plant it. And then of course, if they need to borrow money, they're borrowing it from banks and so forth. Well, banks, let's talk about the banks, because they'd loaned a bunch of money to the United States as well during the time of the American Revolution. And they got promises to be paid back as well. Were they getting paid back? Not so much. They're like, well, couldn't the United States government, under the Articles of Confederation, just tax the people in the country and the states to help pay off those debts? No. So now you got all kinds of people, including banks, that are not getting their loans paid off from the national government. It's a very, very bad thing. I mean, can you imagine if the United States of America today borrowed tons and tons and tons of money to help us get through this very difficult time and then never paid off those loans? That would not be very, very, very bad. Let's hope that doesn't happen. All right, let's go back to the time of Shays Rebellion. So it basically broke out when you had farmers who couldn't pay their loans because they were in all kinds of difficulties. And so the bankers that had made loans to the farmers, they were basically repossessing the farms, okay, putting the farms up for auction, because if, hey, you can't pay your loan, the collateral for the loan, in this case, the farmland, goes up for auction. And so in Massachusetts, they're having these auctions of these farms so that the bankers can, the lenders can get the money. But the problem is that the locals, farmers and so forth, are like, no. So they're like, you can see it right here. They're grabbing the auctioneers and the government officials and saying, no, 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 we are not going to do this. It is total crazy chaos. Yeah, the whole financial system is just falling apart. And you got a rebellion breaking out. And is there a national government that can take care of this? No, the national government can't send in. And so they're like, well, can we get the militia? I mean, can you count on the Massachusetts militia to go around and break these guys up? This is a mess, right? George Washington down in Virginia was helping try and organize people, and ultimately they were able to organize to put the rebellion down. Make sure you have that. The rebellion was put down, and it did ultimately not spread to the rest of the states, but it could have, right? This was a huge problem because if they can't even put down without some difficulty a rebellion in Massachusetts, what's going to say that Britain decides that they're just going to go ahead and attack? How about maybe from Canada in the north? Can the northern states rely on the southern states to help them out? And if you're thinking, oh yeah, Britain, they can only attack from the north by land, Britain can attack by sea anywhere gosh dang wants to, right? I mean, they could zoom their navy in and attack New York or Charleston, South Carolina, or Baltimore, Maryland, or Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Are the states really going to come together if there is a challenge? Is there a national military? No, no national army, no national navy, no national air force, no national space force. Oh wait, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Okay. There were other problems among the states. Territorial disputes. Okay. It was almost as though the British gave this land right here to the west of the original 13 colonies and states and said, hey, here's all this land, have fun fighting over it. And then after you guys have beaten each other up, we'll come back in here and take charge again because you guys suck at running your own country and you can't solve anything. I mean, literally, you've got here, if you can read this close enough, you've got all these different pieces of territory, and New York's like, that's mine, and Pennsylvania's like, no, that's mine. I mean, Connecticut isn't even like connected, but they're claiming a whole bunch of land over here to the west of Pennsylvania, and like, that's mine. I mean, what, Rhode Island is going to start making claims? You had all of these different states making claims to various different territories, and there was no national government that could sort it out. There was some fighting that started to break out among the various different states. Yeah, they were friendly fighting the British, but now when they've got like a whole bunch of new territory they can grab hold of, yeah. I mean, you know how this is going to turn out, right? I mean, when we get the United States Constitution, who's going to be in charge of determining what to do with all of this land, these territories? That's going to be the national government. And are they going to give big chunks to Pennsylvania and New York and Virginia? Will those states be able to expand? You're going to get new states like Kentucky and Tennessee and Mississippi and Alabama and Illinois and Indiana and Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin. Yeah. So anyway, but the fighting nearly broke out there. Okay. Territorial disputes. I want you to write this down as well. Trade disputes between the states. Okay. Trade disputes that almost broke out into wars. I'll give you an example. So you got New York right here and New Jersey, and they were friendly during the American Revolution, yada, 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 but they're separate independent states, almost like separate independent countries. Let's say you had some New York businessmen who were like, oh my gosh, these New Jersey businessmen are coming over here and they're selling their stuff and they're competing with us and they've got lower prices and they're making it real hard on us to do business in New York. And so the New York businessmen go to their government, their New York legislature, and say, hey, New York legislature, we're having a hard time doing business in our own state because these New Jersey businessmen are coming over here and they're out competing us and yada, yada, yada. And you should do something to help us. You know what that is. What is it called when you put a tax on imports coming in from another state? Tariff. So New York was putting tariffs on goods, imported goods coming from New Jersey. And the New York businessmen loved it because they were like, yay, we don't have to compete with those New Jersey businessmen. Well, meanwhile, the New Jersey businessmen were going to their legislature and saying, hey, wow, those New York businessmen are coming in and they're competing in our territory and we think you should put a tariff on them too. Boom. And so you got tariffs now being placed in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. All these different states are putting tariffs on each other because they can. And it's creating all kinds of various different tensions. And yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff could ultimately lead potentially to war too. Okay, so we got all kinds of problems. Is the country strong enough to fight off the British or Spain or France or anybody else that wants to charge in? Doesn't look too good. No national army, just state militias. Territorial disputes. Okay, trade disputes. Oh, there we go, 3. And of course, then you got potentiality of like Daniel Shays Rebellion and so forth going on. You don't want to have that going in other places as well. So, is there a solution? How about maybe getting some folks together in Philadelphia? Here we go, write this down. It's called the Constitutional Convention, and it takes place in the summer of 1787. Okay? In the summer of 1787, a whole bunch of leading men from the 13 states come to Philadelphia to discuss some solutions to all these different problems that we just talked about. They don't call it the Constitutional Convention. In fact, the idea is that let's get together and see if we can maybe change the Articles of Confederation, tweak it if need be to make our country a lot stronger, our national government better. They did, make sure you have this down, they did, those who went there pretty much were thinking we need a stronger national government to solve some of these problems that are popping up among the various different states, okay? So many of the same men who were at the Second Continental Congress that declared independence were also showing up in Philadelphia in 1787. And a very key figure that participated in that was right here, George Washington. He came and he agreed to be the presiding officer of that gathering. And they were going to talk about what they could do to fix things up. They went to Philadelphia, okay. One of the first decisions that they made was they're going to close the doors. They were going to close the doors because they didn't want to have their whole discussion and debate and so forth influenced by what was going on outside. So they shut the doors. And of course, people outside, people like Patrick Henry from Virginia, who very, very much in favor of strong state government and weak national government, he literally said, I smell a rat. This is not good. I know what you guys are up to. This is not going to be good. But the general feeling among the men who gathered was we need to fix this up, right? Because there are so many different problems that need to be fixed up. And so what should we do? Okay. So they gathered there. And there were key figures there. We had Alexander Hamilton, who was there. He had been a key aide for George Washington during the American Revolution. He was there as a representative from New York. You had James Madison from Virginia. He's going to be very, very critical. Some people like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams weren't there. They were serving as diplomats for our country over in Europe, France, for example, for Thomas Jefferson. John Adams was over in Britain, but they supported the effort, and ultimately will be big proponents of what comes out, the Constitution. Oh, by the way, there's this little slide here. 1804 is when our friend Hamilton gets into a fight with Burr, so that's going to be much, much later. And yeah, watch Hamilton. It's cool. Okay, let's see. Now, so to start the convention, it's very interesting because, and you'll want to write this down, one of the very first proposals that was made was known as the Virginia Plan, right? So you get all these people together, Virginia makes a proposal, and here's what their proposal is. And you'll need to write this down. The Virginia Plan, proposed by the delegates from the largest state, said, okay, all right, we want to have a stronger national government, okay? Got that? And let's make sure you have all those different components in there. Stronger national government. What's going to be in that stronger national government? There you go. Ready? It will have a national military. Okay, you can see some of the stuff up here, but I'm going to add some more to it, so don't just base it on this slide. It's going to have a national military. Okay. It's going to have the power to collect taxes from the national government. That's a new thing as well. It's going to have the power to borrow money. So you're going to have taxes collected, borrowing money. That's going to help pay off a lot of the debts that exist to the farmers and to the bankers and so forth. It's going to be able to regulate trade and resolve disputes as far as territory. This is a big deal, okay? Stronger national government, part of the Virginia Plan. But put this down also as well. The Virginia Plan says, all right, we're going to have a legislature, right? It's going to be two-part legislature. Up until this point, they've only had a one-part legislature, like the Second Continental Congress and here. Yeah, it's going to be called bicameral, okay? So you got a House, basically, and a Senate. And in both of those, the number of representatives for the House and the Senate are going to be based on the population of that state. And the thinking is that, look, under national government, bigger states are going to be paying more taxes because they got more people living there. So therefore, the big states should arguably have more representation. Makes sense, right? Of course it does. Well, here's a little bit of a problem, because this Constitutional Convention, they had an agreement going in that the rules were going to be just like they were in the Congress for the Articles of Confederation. In other words, if anything's going to pass, it has to be approved by 9 out of 13 states. You can see right here, the big states supported the Virginia Plan. They liked the idea of the Virginia Plan, especially the part that said the representation is going to be based on population. In other words, if they're going to be paying more taxes and yada, 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 they're going to be sending more soldiers into the military, they need to have a bigger say in that new government. So the big states, Virginia, Massachusetts, you take a look at that. Let me see some of the other big states in there. Massachusetts, already mentioned, Pennsylvania, New York to a degree, they tended to favor the Virginia Plan. Who would oppose it? All the small states, because they would go from being one equal out of all the 13 states to going to, you know, a small thing. I mean, like, look at that. If you look at the relative population of, say, Delaware with only 59,000 people to Virginia with 821,000 people, yeah, Delaware was not in favor of it. The small states, write this down, they voted the Virginia Plan down. All right, I don't even think the Virginia Plan got a majority of the vote. It certainly didn't get 9 out of 13. So then we move on to the New Jersey Plan. Write that down. This was a plan offered by delegation from New Jersey. And it's interesting to note, they had a lot of the same components of the Virginia Plan. So you can write this down. Stronger national government, the ability to have a national military, the ability to have national taxes, the ability to have the national government borrow money, the ability of the national government to resolve trade disputes among the states and territorial disputes, right? Both plans, I forgot to mention this, would have a stronger national executive and a national judiciary court system, right? So 3 parts of the government. So they really did call for a stronger national government, okay? But notice this on the New Jersey Plan. Make sure you have this down. It would be a one-house Congress, and every state would have equal representation. Yeah. So even under the New Jersey Plan, the bigger states are going to end up having to pay more money just because they got more people. But under the New Jersey Plan, they're not going to, every state's going to have just, you know, equal representation. Delaware is going to have the same as Virginia, even though Virginia is probably going to be paying, you know, 12 to 15 times as much in taxes to the national government. So who supported the New Jersey Plan? Smaller states. They liked it. What about the bigger states? Hated it. And so the New Jersey Plan also failed. It didn't come anywhere close to getting 9 out of 13 support. So at this point, you know, you got these guys in there going, oh my gosh, we've got all kinds of agreement on we need a stronger national government to solve these problems. But what about the details as far as like, how's this Congress going to get set up? Are we going to break apart? I mean, is this you know, United States of America going to break up into different pieces like some of those Latin American countries did and broke up into all these different smaller parts? Could have happened. But from Connecticut, write it down, from Connecticut, the delegation, I think it was Roger Sherman was a critical person in this. From Connecticut came what is known, as the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise. It's like, okay, let's see what's in the Great Compromise. Well, first, the things that were in the New Jersey Plan and Virginia Plan. Make sure you have this down. Stronger national government, executive, and a court system, a national judiciary, the ability to collect national taxes, national borrowing ability. Did we say the military? Oh yes, and resolving trade disputes and territorial disputes and so forth. All right, so what we know the Great Compromise for especially is this right here. That's the big part of it. We're going to have a 2-part legislature, okay? We're going to have the House and the Senate. And the Senate is going to be interesting. The Senate, the small states are going to like this. The Senate, you're going to have each state getting 2 senators, okay? All right. And the House is going to be based on the population. So based on the Great Compromise, for example, Delaware would have 2 senators, just like Virginia would, But as far as the representation in the House of Representatives, Virginia is going to have a lot more than Delaware. And of course, if any law is going to be passed by the legislature, by Congress, it will have to pass the House and the Senate, and then go on to the president. So if the big states hate some proposal, they could kill it in the House. If the small states hate some proposal, they can kill it in the Senate. They can all gang up there with, 2 votes from Delaware, 2 votes from Rhode Island, 2 votes from get a majority, kill that bill. All right. So this made it clear that if something was going to pass our national government, it really did have to have a lot of support. And sometimes our national government system requires so much support that you can't always get a consensus. The House might like something, but then the Senate doesn't. I mean, good grief. It's like the coronavirus aid bill. I mean, that was tricky, but the House and the Senate, Republicans, Democrats, the president ultimately came together and did pass legislation. But on other issues, like today, the immigration issue, you got all kinds of different opinions on that, and there has not been much compromise. And part of it is because of the system here, right? Today, president, Republican, United States Senate, majority Republican, United States House, majority Democrat. So if the differences are very strong, you're not going to have an agreement. But nevertheless, make sure you have this. The Great Compromise is huge. That creates what we have today, our United States House and Senate. And the small states, again, like the Senate, the big states like the House. Okay, there was one other issue I want to talk about, and that is the 3/5 compromise. This is kind of messed up, and this is actually not in the Constitution anymore because it has to do with slavery. Oh, and by the way, slavery doesn't exist anymore. We'll get rid of that in the Civil War, thank goodness. But one of the things, there was a big fight between the northern states and the southern states on how slaves were going to be counted in the population. You can see, make sure you have this in your notes, you can see that the population of the southern states, you've got, whatever, 821,000 people. That's whites and blacks, slave and non-slave. Roughly in those southern slave-owning states, you had about 1/3 of the population was African-American slaves. So the Southerners were like, well, we want to have those slaves counted for population so that we get more representatives in the House of Representatives. We like that part. But you know what? As far as like counting the slaves to determine how much taxes our state and the individuals in our state are going to have to pay, we don't like that. We don't want slaves to be counted at all. Of course, the North is going, what, are you kidding? Your slaves can't vote. They shouldn't be counted for representation purposes. But they sure can create economic value for you. They can create economic value, and therefore it should be taxed. So the North is like, yeah, those slaves should be counted for purposes of taxation, but not for purposes of representation. So another dispute. On this one, you could have had a division, right? I mean, right here, let's go back to the map here. Right along here. Everything pretty much to the north, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and so forth, no slavery. I mean, they could have created like the northern United States at that point. There could have been a split. And then you'd have Delaware, Maryland, and all this, their other southern states. They could have created their own separate country. Eventually, we're going to get to the Civil War, and you're going to see a bunch of the southern states go, yeah, we're out of here. We have some problems, and yada, yada, yada. But at this point, were the folks in these continental Constitutional Convention willing to split on that issue? Now, as you can see, there it is. There was a compromise that came up. This is really weird. It's called the 3/5 compromise, and you can see that every 5 slaves is going to be counted as three people for purposes of taxation and representation. So, African American slaves living in the South, they were counted as 60%. So the southern states got a little bit less representation in the House, but they also paid a little bit less in taxes. Yeah, and of course, in the Senate, every southern state had 2 senators, and so as long as there was enough southern states with 2 senators each, then they didn't have to worry about other things going on. So there you go. The Constitution, get through the 3/5 compromise, and there's all kinds of other things in the Constitution. In fact, those details are going to be awaiting you next year entire Constitution unit in government class, but you don't need to worry about that right now. What you do need to worry about is the fact that when the George Washington and all the folks in the Constitutional Convention opened up the door and said, hey, we didn't amend the Articles of Confederation. We actually came up with a brand new document. You're really going to love this. And of course, people like Patrick Henry are like, I knew there was a rat. I don't like what you guys are doing. This is crazy. But I mean, George Washington was behind it. Other key people were behind it. And those people who favor it are going to be known as the Federalists. They favor ratification. They are the Federalists. Okay. And the people who oppose the ratification of the new Constitution, they're the anti-Federalists. They basically want to stick with the Articles of Confederation. Okay. So now, what's the deal? Is the Constitution going to automatically go into effect? No. You're going to have a series of debates going on in each of the 13 states. And here's the key number. Make sure you have this down. 9 out of the 13 states have to agree in order for the Constitution to be ratified. And of course, if you're 1 or 2 states and you're like, well, we're not part of that 13, I don't know, I suppose you could be your own country. They could. So the basic gist is your pro-ratification Federalists saying we need the Constitution to solve these problems that we've been talking about. And don't worry, the national government's not going to be too powerful. But the anti-Federalists are like, no, the national government's going to be way too powerful. And you're going to take away our rights and da-da-da-da-da. And it was bad with the British, and now it's bad with you guys. And so in any event, you have these debates going on all across the country, okay? Key people, James Madison from Virginia, Alexander Hamilton from New York, and John Jay, also from New York, got involved in the debates that are taking place in each of the different states. Particularly in New York, that was one of the critical last states that was debating ratification. And they came up with all kinds of written arguments in favor of the Constitution. Together, those arguments are known as the Federalist Papers. They were printed and distributed, and you have all these debates and so forth. And I mean, it's going to be touch and go. Some states are like, yeah, let's do this. Okay. In fact, you want to write this down. Some of the states, like, for example, which is the first state? Which is the first state that was like, yeah, we're in it? Well, it's known as the first state. It's Delaware. Delaware ratified it very, very quickly. Some of the other folks are going, no, I think we got a problem here. The national government's going to be too powerful. You need to have a Bill of Rights. And they're like, oh, really? Every state, make sure you have that. Every state in their own constitution had a Bill of Rights. A document like the English Bill of Rights when Britain was in charge of the colonies, a document that protected individual rights from the power of state government. And now some of these anti-federalists are going, well, there's no Bill of Rights for the national government to protect individuals from the excesses of the national government. And the Federalists, oh my gosh, do we have to go back to Philadelphia and like add this? And they're like, okay, all right. We promise, right? It says right there, we promise to add a Bill of Rights after ratification. Now, my general advice is to you, if somebody puts a contract in front of you and then you notice there's something missing, don't sign it. Get it fixed first and then sign it. Nevertheless, this is exactly what happened. The Constitution is ratified. And then, because in the Constitution, there's a provision for amendment. The Constitution, after it's ratified and you get the first Congress elected, you get the first president and so forth in there, one of the first things they did was propose amendments, 10 of them. In fact, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are going to be known together as the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, the right to not have the government come charging into your house without a warrant. I mean, right against cruel and unusual punishment, all kinds, right to remain silent. All kinds of various different important rights in the Bill of Rights. And the Federalists, the people who were elected, held to their promise. The first 10 amendments were ratified, added to the Constitution very, very soon after. You're like, oh, that was easy. all you need is 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate to agree to a constitutional amendment, and then you send it to the states, and you need 3/4 of the states to go along with that. Easy peasy, right? Well, in fact, you'll know this very clearly. Our Constitution has been amended only 27 times in our entire history. So after these first 10 amendments, very quickly, we had another 17, and that was stretched out over a long period of time. But in any event, here we go. So let's look at this. These are the states, and you want to have this written down in the order of the ratification. So here we go. We've got Delaware coming in first, and I like this map because it shows it shows you visually like how the vote went in the state of Delaware. I mean, they were like, yeah, we're totally in favor of this. So you got Delaware coming in first, the first state. Okay, Pennsylvania comes in second. Nice debate going on there, but they ultimately ratify it. Notice this is in the winter of 1787. Constitutional Convention didn't take too long in 1787, so they were able to get it out there. There's New Jersey, the third state, also in December. Let's take a look at, oh, Georgia. So we got a southern state now coming on in early 1788. And if you spot the fifth one, yep, there it is, Connecticut, January 1788. Oh, we got a trend going in here. Massachusetts, big, that was a big one. And there was a tough debate going on there. You can see there's some areas that were in favor of the Constitution. Other areas have a lot more anti-federalist support, but nevertheless, Massachusetts comes in, and it's the sixth state. Okay, seventh, Maryland coming in. That's April 1788. So now we're going well into 1788. And oh, there we go, South Carolina. They want to join in. They think it's cool. So who's the ninth? Right up there, June of 1788. New Hampshire is the ninth state. Now, write this down. After you have 9, is that it? I mean, do we not care about what New York does or Virginia? I mean, seriously? No. Make sure you understand. If you're going to be the United States of America, you need like the largest populated state, Virginia, to be in there. But Virginia does vote in favor. They ratify the Constitution June 1788, and the next month, New York comes in. It's at that point, and then of course, let me see, what later in the year, North Carolina comes in as the 12th. It's at that point they're like, let's do this. Let's have an election. So in the fall, November of 1789, you have the first election for the members of Congress, the first election for the United States president and vice president, and George Washington is chosen as the president, and John Adams is chosen as the vice president. And then and they're sworn into office, and then Rhode Island's sitting there going, what are we going to be like, our own separate little country, and just like, you need us, you can't be the United States without Rhode Island. Yeah, notice this. They came in and they joined in as the 13th ratifying state, May of 1790. The country had already gotten on their way by that point, but that's cool. So Rhode Island comes in at the very, very end there. Hoorah. Yeah, there we go. There's the actual vote tallies. You can see landslide in Delaware, New Jersey, Georgia, a closer margin there. That's a pretty big margin there. But look, yeah, Massachusetts was quite close. And Virginia, ooh, that was very, very close. New York, their legislature, the margin was only 3 votes. So it was a very critical thing. I mean, our country could have turned out differently. The Constitution could have been defeated. Our country might have not gone on without the support of the folks in Virginia and New York. But nevertheless, they did. And so now we have here the United States Constitution for the United States of America, with a stronger national government to handle the various different challenges that we're going to be facing from here on out. Be sure now to watch the episode of Liberty. I'm going to put a separate link for that so that you can watch that, and I don't have to worry about YouTube blocking my video for copyright things. So that concludes our lesson for today. It's good being with you guys. Take care, be safe, be healthy.